2 words of Czech, thanks to Zedek. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Walsh. I teach in Ireland in an Institute of Technology, which is a third-level institute, but I have a lot of contacts in secondary and primary schools, and I'm the Irish partner on the Chemistries All Around Us network. So, from Year I this morning, we heard about the Czech education system, and if you look at the slide, you can see that the Irish system is pretty similar. The main differences would be at this area here, because primary school only goes to 11 or 12 years, and then the secondary school is compulsory until 16 years of age. Most students stay until 17 or 18 years of age. In the middle of the secondary school, there is a 1 year that is optional called transition year. So that optional year is only taken by about 50% of the students. So we have these pretty similar stages, and as you look at the numbers of people who are taking chemistry as we go up through the school system, you'll see that the problems, as you just mentioned, are pretty much international. The primary school science curriculum was introduced in Ireland in 2003 and 2004. And all schools now have to incorporate science in the primary classes. What's changed in the last couple of years is that in primary science education, science trainee teachers now have to take modules in science, because before 2 years ago it wasn't compulsory to take the science modules, so many teachers were afraid of the science. And we've had a number of initiatives to encourage them to incorporate more science in their primary curriculum. But then there are the demands of the other subjects in the syllabus. At the moment, the junior cycle, only 90% of schools had compulsory science, which means 10% of our schools, and we have about 700 secondary schools. So up to 70 schools in Ireland didn't have compulsory science at second level, which is kind of worrying if then you're trying to sell it for beyond second level. About 50% of students take transition year, and then in the senior cycle, chemistry is a subject on its own, and this year we've seen a slight improvement. About 14.5% of students sat the terminal exam in chemistry, so that's slightly improved from the previous 10 years. The part that we would most be interested in terms of where I work, is that the science courses only account for 13% of the total enrolment at tertiary level. Now, I don't have to start talking about the fiscal crisis in Europe, but more and more students are being encouraged to stay in school, to go on to third level, maybe to mask some of the hidden, or to hide some of the figures in terms of unemployment. But what is happening is they are more and more being directed towards science and technology subjects, particularly at third level. However, we still have a gap, we still have problems at second level. So, this year has seen some changes, or the start of some changes in Ireland. The junior certificate, which covers the first 3 years of secondary school, was revised about 7 years ago. So we've had a new curriculum that's been examined for about 7 years. And now, this year, they've decided to change that. So we're now in a phase of transition in terms of what the students are going to do in the science subjects for the first 3 years of secondary school. The transition year, remember, isn't optional, but is optional, but more and more students are studying transition year and the science in transition year. The senior cycle is now at a phase that we call post-consultation. A new syllabus is going to be introduced. The teachers, the stakeholders, the government departments, industry have all been consulted to see whether or not they approve of the new syllabus. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about the changes in these syllabi. The one that's perhaps most worrying is the junior cycle one. The reforms that were announced in October 2012 are going to dramatically change the way science is taught. First of all, remember that science wasn't compulsory for all secondary schools. Now it is going to be compulsory. However, Typically, a 15-year-old student in Ireland taking the terminal exams would sit between 9 and 11 subjects. Now they are going to have 4 core subjects: English, Irish, mathematics, and probably 1 other language. And then science is going to become one of a suite of subjects that can be modified according to the school. So what the curriculum developers are saying is that the students should still encounter chemistry, physics and biology, but not as we know it. They should still learn all of the theory that we expect them to know if they're able to progress to the senior level, but they've to learn it through inquiry-based methods. So for example, at the moment, one of the schools in Limerick, I am on an advising team for the new curriculum. They're a pilot school for this new curriculum. And the students who've just come into first year junior certificate have done their science this term through the science of rockets. So you have rockets and rocketry. They've learned measurements, they've learned some physics. They haven't learned a whole lot of biology, but they've learned some chemistry. Next semester, I'm going to be working with them on a module of forensic science. So the forensic science is going to be seen as a way to develop their critical thinking skills, to develop their measurement and analytical skills, but also to learn some basic chemistry, physics and biology. So maybe we're trying to cover up a problem by masking what they're actually learning. The hope will be that when the first examination happens in 2016, the students will still have learned the core principles of the chemistry, physics and biology. But it's difficult to know how well this is going to work, and maybe in another 7 years' time, someone will come along and say it's time to change again. So the problem with science and chemistry in general is the students we've seen across Europe, we've discussed for the last 2 days in the partners' meetings, the problems of demotivation. And part of the problems arise from the fact that a lot of the chemistry teachers in particular are not particularly qualified to teach chemistry. So when they encounter the chemistry junior certificate, it's very often done from the book, done as quickly as possible, and let's move on to biology or to physics, which are the teachers' specialities. However, remember, they still have to sit the exams at the end of the day. Due to the economic crisis, some schools, and a scary figure, 25% of schools are being forced to drop teachers of specialist subjects which only have minority uptake. So we're in this perpetual problem at the moment. There's no point in me talking to you about laboratory equipment and technical support, because I'm sure some of you have the same issues there. This is a quote from Graham Love is the Director of Discover Science and Engineering. That's a government department that promotes science, technology, engineering and mathematics. This was his quote in August on the day the Leaving Certificate results were announced. And he's calling our students savvy. Savvy means they're in the know. They know what kind of subjects to go for. So he's encouraging parents, students, teachers to look at careers prospects in science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And we're starting to see a reversal of the negative trend that we had in the physical sciences. However, a 0.5% increase, to me, could be a 0.5% decrease next year. It very much depends on a whole lot of other factors. So what do we need in terms of the curriculum reform? We need to motivate the students by looking at the way they're being taught. I've spoken to you a little bit about the new syllabi at junior certificate level. The new approach at this junior certificate level, these are the key words from the consultation documents. This new curriculum is going to be student-centred. The student is at the heart, and building up transferable skills through their sciences, as well as a love and appreciation of science, is at the core of the new curriculum. At least that's what they're saying in theory at the moment. It should develop transferable skills, such as critical thinking, numeracy and literacy. It should encourage people to value the role of science and its contribution to society. I'm selling that idea to the converted in the audience today, but our constant job is to go out and try to sell that to students and to their parents and teachers. to use appropriate technologies, and to have inquiry-based learning underpinning all of the new curricula. There will also be standardised testing from 2016. So this is the kind of textbooks the students have at the moment. These are junior certificate textbooks. It talks about science being a voyage of discovery, science matters, breakthrough science, discovering science. And then we find that we have some schools very well equipped for laboratory, practical science. We've other schools where a lot of the science is taught in classrooms using these books. Now, using the books as against laboratory experience, there's a big difference there. So what we're saying is, if the new curricula are going to work, the government has to financially incentivise schools to perpetrate these new curricula. At senior secondary level, what does the curriculum reform mean? We're hoping again that it will sell chemistry for chemistry's sake. And the quotation is taken from the preamble to the new syllabus documents. So you can see that they hope that chemistry now will become valued for lifelong learning purposes. What it means for teachers, teachers have to embrace the new communications technologies. We have to incorporate the internet, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, anything that you want to mention whereby your students communicate on a day-to-day basis. They live in a very visual, very fast-driven, media-dominated world. So we have to keep up. That's part of the problem. We have to keep up. And we can't expect the teachers to go off on their own and embrace these technologies. We have to, again, incentivise them to do it by whatever methods necessary. 2 schools in Limerick no longer have textbooks. Their students have iPads, which they get when they go into first year in school. Now, for me, the value of the book could never be discredited. So I don't really agree with the idea of everything being on a tablet or on an iPad. But at the same time, that's the communication method most of the students use. So it's about achieving a balance. How are they going to come into third level to a beautiful library facility like this if they've never actually picked a book off a shelf? So we have to encourage the numeracy and the literacy and the new technologies, but not discard all of the old ideas at the same time. So what it means then in terms of teacher training is that the teacher trainers realise they have to teach the teachers to embrace the new technologies, but also to keep au fait with the old principles as well. So it's a real balancing act for the teachers. They're going to be the most important players in the whole process. In Ireland, there's a service called the Professional Development Service for Teachers, PDST. And they encourage teachers to come to in-service training. New teachers who've qualified this year have to attend a monthly meeting with a mentor group. And that's a new idea. Previously, it was graduate from college, off you go, you have to do a year's probation, but you could be on your own. You could be isolated in a part of the countryside with no one to actually give you the support in terms of professional development. So there is an attitude of encouragement there for the new teachers. There are other less formal supports, but again, a lot of government money, industrial support has developed different types of ways of teachers meeting with each other, gaining new knowledge, gaining experience, pretty much like what you're doing today here. And we have a government programme, Discover Science and Engineering, which is very active. The internet site is the science.ie site. It has got lots of information about careers. It has information about projects. It has information about where to go to get help. But it's not a site just for teachers or educators. It's a site also for the students and for their parents and for their career guidance counsellors and so on. It sends a monthly electronic magazine which gives the latest news in Irish science. It tells you where things are happening and it tells you where to go if you need to get help. So that's been a very successful initiative. There are other ways then that the students can motivate themselves. So there are a number of different science competitions, pretty much like the competitions that Yarai talked about earlier on in terms of the Masaryk, I don't know if I pronounced it, school, but the only problem with these competitions, this is me, with the winners of a SciFest competition that I held in my institute. And what I've found over the 5 years that we've been doing it is it's a bit like the Czech example from the school here. The best students enter the competition. This competition was designed to encourage all students to do some inquiry in science, to learn how to put together a report and to tell people about their work. Now what we're finding, last night I got an email from the national coordinator saying we're going to have competitions before your competition. It shouldn't all be about the competition. When we started the SciFest off, it was everybody who entered got to display their work. Now it's become almost professional. Printed posters like the posters outside. People, you know, the best, the cream are rising to the top again. So it's very hard to find initiatives that encompass all the students and teach all of them the value of science in everyday life. By the way, this was at the national final it was held in Intel, the computer company, just outside Dublin, and the two girls were my finalists, and their project was looking at how nappy cream for babies' bottoms, can be used to cure mastitis in cattle. So it was bringing agricultural science into the 21st century, an old-fashioned remedy, and they looked at whether or not the old-fashioned remedy was scientific. Good inquiry work. Just before I finish now, every year in Ireland, for 1 week in November, we have a week called Science Week. The theme changes from year to year, but a little bit like the Czech examples earlier, it's about the colleges encouraging their students, their staff, to sell their wares, to let people see what they're actually doing in science. So we've got, again, we saw it earlier on, the methane mamba. So this was a workshop that we had for for teachers, and that allowed the teachers to then go back to their schools to do these demonstrations, to maybe motivate the students a little bit more in science. And then we have our own students do a circuit of experiments that they show to primary school students. The key thing is about sparking the interest, but then the problems are in the follow-through. It's one thing to spark the interest, it's one thing to keep looking at the curriculum, to keep talking about revisions, but there's an awful lot of very solid groundwork that has to be done in between if it's going to allow a perpetration in terms of numbers of students motivated to study science. So I think that's all I have to say to you this morning, and I hope I've given you some ideas from Ireland, and thank you for your attention.